Bug sweeps are conducted with sophisticated and very expensive professional TSCM equipment, or they should be conducted with sophisticated and expensive equipment, but that is not always the case. Our first look at the brutal truth about bug sweeps is what equipment some private investigators use to do bug sweeps. I have seen many a private investigator advertise themselves as bug sweep professionals, and they show up with equipment like this, or like this, or like this. And I have even seen PIs show up with equipment like this. Okay, those first three pieces of, well, not so professional bug sweep equipment were cheap things you could buy online for maybe $50 or so. In fact, I had a video a while back where I tested one of these not so professional pieces of bug sweep equipment, and it did, well, okay, sort of. Those things are fine for the do-it-yourself guy if the do-it-yourself guy has a lot of knowledge about radio frequencies and how they work. You see, these things, these cheap devices, are not what they call themselves. They are not bug detectors. What they are is radio frequency detectors, or what is often called an RF detector. And here is a big secret most people do not know. Come here, get closer, listen up. You, me, everyone in the world right now, we're all being bombarded with thousands of radio frequency signals all day, every day. That is right. Right now, if you had a good spectrum analyzer, you would see all of the radio frequencies around you, and it would look something like this. You see every single one of those spikes. Everything above -100 on this chart represents a radio signal bouncing off of you and everything around you right now. This video is sponsored by OREP Insurance and Working PI Magazine. OREP is a leading provider of private investigator liability insurance. Visit orep.org for a quote today. So when you use one of those cheap devices to try to find a real bug, a real piece of spy equipment, what it will actually alert you to is all of these signals. So unless you are able to decipher every single blip and beep one of those cheap things does, well, then those cheap tools are essentially worthless. You see, that is one of the big secrets about bug sweeps, but we have only touched a wee bit on the brutal truth about bug sweeps. Listen up. You see, not all of these radio signals are not only surrounding you right now, but they are also bouncing off of you and everything around you. And those bounce signals become magnified to those cheap devices, and then it alerts you saying there may be, just possibly, there might be a bug near you. These negative positives or false positives then become a distraction and leave the person looking for something that is not there or chasing ghost and phantom signals instead of seeing actual, credible potential threats. What you really need to find a real bug that is transmitting is what we call a near-field RF detector like this. But wait, is this even effective today? You see this piece of equipment? It is the CPM 700 from REI. It is a professional-grade near-field RF detector, and you might think this is a good piece of equipment. After all, it is professional-grade and near-field, right? Well, folks, when I started doing bug sweeps many, many years ago, I got myself one of these, and you know what? It worked great. However, the CPM 700 is now extremely old. I see people out there today still using these, and they call themselves professional bug sweeper. You see, the CPM 700, it goes all the way up to 3 gigahertz in RF detection. And that sounds like a lot if you spin it just the right way. But today I have an Andre, or advanced near-field detector like this, which can go up to 12 gigahertz. So the brutal truth about these two pieces of professional equipment is that there is 3 gigahertz or 12 gigahertz. Which one would you rely on to identify the most bugs? Another big myth out there about bug sweeps is that one of these devices can find everything, and that myth needs to be debunked right now. Even with the Andre, I cannot find every type of bug out there, folks. The Andre is an amazing piece of equipment, to be sure. It not only scans for RF in the near field, but it also has a log periodic directional antenna, a VLF antenna, a locator antenna for very near field, a concealed antenna for covert scanning, a carrier current probe to check electrical lines, and an audio transformer and an acoustic leakage probe, as well an IR invisible light detector. And it can also check phone lines. And you know what? Even with all of that, it still cannot find every bug out there. In fact, it can only find a fraction of the real credible threats that may exist. You see, many times these intrusive devices, these eavesdropping bugs, may never transmit anything. That is right. They may never transmit a signal. And if they never transmit a signal, none of the devices we have looked at thus far will do any good. You see, some of these devices are what we refer to as drop devices, and some devices are what we refer to as burst devices, and some fall into the category of dead or dormant devices. Let's take a real close look at drop, burst, dead, and dormant devices. A drop device is a device which is just dropped into a location hidden somewhere, like under a piece of furniture or in some nook or cranny somewhere. Then the individual who planted that device must come back periodically to retrieve the data, charge the battery, or change the device out. A burst device is one that does transmit the data it gathers. However, it is not transferring or transmitting that data all of the time. What a burst device will do is transmit data on a set schedule, like 2 o'clock in the morning, or once an hour, or some other predetermined schedule. So unless you are scanning for radio frequencies at the exact time it bursts or transmits its data, the RF detector will never locate it. Then there is the dead or dormant devices. Now, drop devices and burst devices can become dead or dormant devices. All of these devices need power to operate and to transmit or transfer data. So unless they are hardwired into a power supply, their battery will eventually die out. Thus, they become dead or dormant. Again, an RF detector will not find these dormant and dead devices since they are never transmitting. And many times the person doing the bugging simply doesn't care if they die if they got the information they wanted. You see, another huge secret here, bugs today are easy to find and cheap to buy. No one worries if they lose a $20 or a $50 bug. They just want to gather the intel they need. We have had cases where we found GPS trackers with long dead batteries from years ago, and we have found many dead recording devices that have been just sitting there for months because the person doing the bugging had no access or desire to retrieve the item. So the dead truth, pun intended there, is the brutal truth that a complete and thorough physical inspection with eyes, hands, and inspection cameras needs to be completed in every bug sweep by trained and proficient technicians to ensure the best job has been conducted. Listen up, folks. Here is the brutal truth about bug sweeps that no one is talking about. The vast majority of bug sweeps conducted today are done by fly-by-night rip-off artists using cheap equipment like this, calling themselves professionals, selling bug sweeps at rock-bottom pricing to unsuspecting clients who never needed a bug sweep in the first place. That is right. Most people who are looking for a bug sweep really do not need a bug sweep. The vast majority of calls we get inquiring about a bug sweep are people who are most likely suffering from some form of mental illness. That mental illness may be schizophrenia, paranoid delusions, depression, drug-induced paranoia, or many other types of mental illness. Now, I am not a medical professional, but in my vetting of clients, it often becomes obvious to me that their fears are most likely unfounded. I get calls all the time where the client refers to they or them, but when we dig deeper, there is no further description of who they or them might be. The client just feels that people are watching them. Or the client looks at different things going on around them, and in trying to make sense of it all, they come to the conclusion that they must be bugged. We hear things like my phone start crackling all the time. They're talking to me through my TV. They have infrared devices shooting into my house. Or stuff was moved in my house, but all the doors were locked. I know they were here, but they shut off my security cameras each time they come in, so I never catch them on video. Folks, this is real. These are the calls we get day in and day out. Now, obviously, We get legit calls from clients involved in a nasty divorce situation, a bad child custody case, questionable business transactions, and other real life scenarios. But those scoundrel PIs out there using cheap and outdated equipment, and they are just grabbing the low hanging fruit and taking advantage of the helpless people who have no way of even knowing they may have an illness affecting their thoughts and judgment. Now, do we take some of those clients that may have mental health concerns? Yes, we do, from time to time. We may work with their families, friends, attorneys, and even doctors and do what we call a peace of mind sweep. We go into a peace of mind sweep still assuming there is a bug and working to either prove or disprove that assumption, just like any other case. But oftentimes I have to have that tough talk with the client on the phone and let them know they may be better off spending their limited financial resources on another type of professional, and I recommend them to talk about their fears with their doctor first. Now, this may seem counterintuitive to what a lot of people think as normal business practices. Turning down good money from clients willing to spend their hard-earned dollars does not always make sense. But you know what? I would rather know I tried to help them and I didn't take advantage of their situation than just make a quick buck to make a quick buck.
Let's dive right in and learn how to detect and neutralize hidden surveillance devices. A bug sweep, also known as a technical surveillance countermeasures or TSCM sweep, is the process of detecting and locating hidden surveillance devices such as audio recorders, cameras, GPS trackers, or other tracking devices. As a professional investigator who conducts TSCM bug sweeps, it is crucial to know how to perform a bug sweep to protect your client's privacy and ensure the integrity of your investigation and your bug sweep. There are various types of surveillance devices that you might encounter during a bug sweep. Let's cover some common ones you may run into. The first is referred to as audio bugs. These devices record and many times transmit conversations and are often disguised as everyday objects like pens, USB chargers, clocks, or smoke detectors. Then there are hidden cameras. These can also be concealed in everyday items like picture frames, light fixtures, or power outlets. And tracking devices such as GPS trackers are devices that can be attached or hidden inside vehicles or personal belongings to track someone's movements. A key thing to remember about tracking devices is that there are many ways with today's technology to track someone besides GPS. Common devices we see now do include regular GPS trackers, which can be as small as a pack of gum, but we also are seeing others like tile trackers and Apple AirTags. To perform a successful bug sweep, you'll need the right equipment. Some pieces of equipment you need include the following. The first go-to piece of equipment is what is often referred to as an RF or radio frequency detector. These devices detect radio signals emitted by hidden cameras, hidden audio recorders, and other surveillance devices. But not all RF detectors are created equal. There are plenty of cheap devices on the internet that cost a couple of $100s or less in some cases, but these are not pieces of professional bug sweep equipment. These are what we refer to as simple RF detectors. They pick up everything, every radio signal, regardless of proximity and regardless of distance. Yes, you can turn down the sensitivity on these devices, and that helps to a point, but the strength of reflected signals are often very powerful at the point of reflection, which makes these cheap RF detectors often give what is referred to as false positives. You see, RF signals often reflect off of any metal object, including motor windings like what's in a ceiling fan or a refrigerator or other appliances, as well as regular household copper wiring running through the house. The equipment you need to have to overcome these false positives and keep you from chasing ghost or phantom signals all day long is what we refer to as a near-field RF detector. A near-field RF detector is able to identify what signals are being emitted in the near field or within close proximity, like within a foot of the RF detector's antenna or probe. A professional near-field RF detector will also have multiple antennas, like a locator probe, which allows you to sweep in extremely close proximity, looking for devices within a couple of inches of the probe. They will also have probes like a directional log periodic antenna that allow the technician to see the direction the signal is coming from, which helps isolate outside RF signals. It is quite common in today's technological world to have thousands of radio signals bouncing all around us at any given time, and using cheap equipment just keeps you chasing ghost signals instead of focusing your attention on real potential threats. A lens finder is also a good piece of equipment to have when doing a bug sweep. This tool can help you spot hidden cameras by reflecting light off of their lenses. Again, there are cheap ones and professional grade ones. The cheap ones are okay, but have a huge limitation in the amount of power the infrared lights have, as well as a limitation in the angle at which you can see the lens when you use it. A professional grade lens finder, like the Spy Finder Pro, which we use, has enough power to allow lenses to be seen across a room at greater angles, up to 30 degrees or more. Now, it is not recommended, though, to just scan a room at a distance with this. You should still try to scan as close as possible to any suspicious areas for the best results. Another must-have piece of professional bug sweep equipment is a non-linear junction detector. A non-lin, as we affectionately call it, is a device that can detect electronic components even if they are not actively transmitting signals or not powered up, or even if they are broken. A non-linear junction detector is useful for finding dormant bugs, or what we call drop devices, burst devices, and passive devices. Now that you know some of the basics about TSCM bug sweeps, let's discuss some techniques for conducting a thorough bug sweep. The first thing we start off with is a complete visual inspection. We examine all the areas to be swept for any unusual or out-of-place objects. You want to pay close attention to power outlets, light fixtures, electronic devices, curtains, vents, cubbies, and any other places a device could have been hidden. You need to look high and low and all around. This does not mean you stand in the middle of the room and take a quick glance. When we do our physical inspection, we utilize 2 or more technicians using eyes, hands, and inspection cameras. That is another piece of equipment you must have to conduct a professional sweep. An inspection camera with a long, like 15-foot or longer reach, with an adjustable flashlight and camera on the end so you can get video or take pictures of what you see with it. These are necessary to look in high places, look in low places, look in vents and other hard areas to see. Now, when you conduct your RF sweep, you want to use your near field RF detector to scan the entire area for radio signals. This means you scan every wall, every piece of furniture, the ceiling, the floor, everything, every picture, every device, everything you see. This is a very time-intensive part of your sweep, as you need to do what we refer to as painting every surface. You can't just walk around the room. You need to sweep everything slowly and watch for signals. This is another reason why having a professional near-field RF detector is necessary. The cheap models will just beep when they detect any signal, be it an actual signal or a reflected signal. With a professional RF detector, it will have a visual display that shows the actual signal frequency it sees, like 2.435 gigahertz. And if that signal is in the near field, it will do what we call flatlining, which means it visually indicates to the technician that there is a potential nearby RF device. The technician then can utilize various techniques to determine if this is a credible threat or not, and then continue the sweep or take appropriate action as required. You also need to check physical phone lines through the area being swept to, regardless of whether they have a landline phone or not. These must be inspected. And how do you do that, you ask? Well, if you have a professional near-field RF detector like the Andre from REI, which is what we use, it also checks phone lines too. These phone lines are copper wire running throughout the house and going out into the world, and they can be used for eavesdropping very easily. And there are other copper wires running through the house or space to be swept as well. Those are the 110 carrier current lines. Yes, the electrical lines. These can be used to transmit data as well, and guess what? The Andre has the ability to safely and securely test the electrical lines for any signal transmission. Another necessary and often overlooked or seldom ever conducted part of a professional sweep is to identify credible security threats to the client. Not only are we looking for hidden audio recording devices, hidden cameras, and GPS trackers, but we are also looking for things like unterminated wires, which could indicate something was or could be attached to them to transmit data. We are also looking for suspicious holes in the walls, the ceiling, furniture, and any other areas where something may have been placed in the past or utilized to place something in the future. When it comes to the vehicle, well, we treat those the same as a room in the house. We do a complete sweep and inspection of the vehicle, inside and out, under and over for that matter. After all that being said, it is easy to see why it takes a team of professional TSCM bug sweep technicians 4 to 6 hours on average to sweep an average house.
Professional TSCM equipment is very expensive. It is not uncommon for a professional TSCM company to spend tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on this equipment. And the training for doing TSCM gets quite expensive as well, as it requires days, even weeks sometimes, to get up to speed with a new piece of equipment. Now, one thing I think is lacking, though, in most TSCM training is covering the not-to-do list of things that every TSCM specialist, technician, and company should be aware of. So let's go over that list right now. The first thing to discuss starts with the first contact with client when they call and inquire how much a bug sweep will cost and what it will entail. You need to ensure you never overpromise results. This is huge. I have clients all the time call and tell me that they hired such and such a company and they promised they would find the bug in their house, but they came up empty-handed. The reality of working in the TSCM business is that we often do not find any bugs during our sweeps. Often the client has a suspicion, but no actual proof that something is planted in their house, office, or vehicle. I hear this all the time. My ex always mentions places where I have been in our conversations. Then when I dig a little further, I discover the way this was brought up in a conversation may very well be one of a couple of things. Often it is some place where the client went with the kids or was planning on taking them and they heard about it. Then the kids say something to or around the other parent, and then they assume it happened. It is probably more often related to some trolling by the other parent. They just ask questions to get reactions and see if the other parent slips up and gives any information. If you get so engulfed in the client's belief that there has to be something, you can easily overpromise on the results, getting you into a legal pickle. Another big one to watch out for is lacking in confidentiality. Your contract should have a confidentiality clause that protects the client. As well, you need to ensure you and your technicians will abide by this confidentiality. You need to make sure that you are not always talking about that crazy client who swore someone was listening in on their conversations all the time and the crazy things they were doing to try to protect themselves. We have been hired by many clients who have hired other TSCM companies or other private investigators in the past, and there is no reason for me to assume they will not hire others in the future either. I have also been contacted by the person on the other side of the case who wants me to work for them. They didn't know I was working for the other side already, but they needed our services, and when it comes to TSCM, well, there are a limited amount of people who offer this service due to the costs involved. This gets a bit tricky to overcome, but you need to ensure that you deal with it discreetly so as to not let them know you are already working with the other side. I will usually just overprice the gig or tell them we are booked for a long time and not accepting new clients at this time. Ignoring client privacy is another huge mistake you must avoid. While this is closely tied to client confidentiality, it can also mean other things. During the initial planning stages with the client, I make sure I ask them what areas of their house, office, or vehicle they do not want us to check. I also let them know we will not be going through clothing drawers, closets, and other areas that contain personal items. If we need to inspect these types of areas further, we will ask the client to empty that space so we can do a full inspection. We then will confirm this in a preparations email with the client, which we send out before the sweep. And we have the client indicate to us during the initial walkthrough, the day of the sweep, what areas we need to steer clear of. A huge pet peeve of mine on this list of things not to do on a TSCM sweep is to use unreliable or inferior equipment. I get clients all the time who start with, I hired this guy who said he was professionally trained and had professional equipment. Then he came over, walked through my house for about 20 minutes with this thing that looked like a little walkie-talkie, then said there was nothing and then left. And I have never heard anything else from him.
Unfortunately, there are scammer private investigators out there using these cheap RF detection devices, calling themselves professional TSCM technicians. Some people are also using very outdated professional TSCM equipment doing this type of work too. The world of TSCM is a fast-changing, ever-evolving world, to be sure. If you have equipment from 10 years ago, it is probably very outdated and cannot detect the threats presented with today's technology. I know it is expensive to upgrade, update, and keep things state of the art. I have those same struggles in my business. But I also know I need to keep everything up to date to ensure my clients that we are conducting the best possible job for them. The simple solution to this for any TSCM company is to make sure your fees reflect all of the costs involved in running this type of business. You can't just charge for your time on the job. You need to charge for the use of the equipment as well, and then bank that part for the future investments in new equipment and upgrades. While having professional grade TSCM bug sweeping equipment is absolutely necessary, you must also ensure you never overlook the physical inspection. This is another thing I hear from clients who hired other companies to do a sweep for them. They never even opened a drawer while doing the sweep. In a recent vehicle sweep we had, the client told me the person who did the sweep of their vehicle never looked under the car, not even with a mirror. Guess where the most likely place to place a GPS tracker is? Yep, under the car, on a metal surface, attached by a magnet. You must look in every nook and cranny using eyes, hands, and inspection cameras. The equipment can only do so much, and if the device is passive and it is not transmitting a signal, then all of the RF detection equipment you have will not detect it. The truth be known, folks, most threats are found during the physical inspection part of a professional TSCM sweep. Skipping a post-sweep debrief is the next thing we need to ensure we do not do. In fact, you need to do several debriefs involving the sweep. First, the technicians should be discussing the sweep once they have completed the sweep but are still on scene. This debrief will ensure they are on the same page, that everything was covered and that all technicians agree that the sweep has been concluded successfully. The second debrief is the debrief with the client. This should be conducted by doing a walkthrough with the client, covering everything that was done in every room and pointing out any potential threats observed. And then a third debrief should be after the fact to cover all aspects of the sweep. What went well, what didn't go well, where can we improve, and what did we excel in? Self-evaluation is a must in this line of work. I know it's hard to do sometimes, but this is the only way to identify areas where your company needs to improve. Once the sweep is done and the client has been debriefed, you must ensure you do not neglect to send the final report. The reporting process is twofold. First, to let the client know what you did and document any threats so they have a record of it. And second, so you have a complete record of what was done. Your final report should include photos too, where it makes sense to put them in the report.